exactly done that. That's hilarious.
There you go. We were talking just before we started about, sometimes me and Jo think we should just show behind the scenes stuff because otherwise it always looks too perfect. Here we go. We've fixed that problem.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, hi everyone who's watching the Bookkeepers podcast. I'm really lucky to be here with James Burtt, who's just fixed why you heard everything in our conversation coming back. Oh my gosh. Hi everyone. Well, it's nice to see this. Do you know what? This has got everyone involved in the conversation, and you can see that it's not always all perfect behind the scenes. Let us know if you're watching live. Let us know if you're watching the replay. It's really good to see you all. I'm really excited to chat with James. I hear from James, I don't know, probably most days, actually. You're in the Winners Club on Clubhouse and there's a big chat going on, lots of entrepreneurs, and you run some of the sessions. And I was actually listening to a conversation you had this morning with our friend Beji Solanki and just hearing about his journey. And I always love your friendly attitude, but I also know you've got so much to support us with in terms of building our personal brand. So thank you for today. James, do you want to start by telling us a bit about what you do?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And thank you for having me on first and foremost. Did anyone notice how defensive I got when Zoe said about I had an audio issue? I was like, I do not have an audio issue, Zoe. You are the problem. At least I kept that under wraps. My audio ego didn't kick on too much there. Yeah, so I have got a production agency. So we're called Phonic Media. We've launched 162 podcasts for clients around the world. We work with celebrities, actors, athletes, and all that kind of good stuff. But we also, our bread and butter is working with entrepreneurs, business owners, and experts in their field to help them to effectively explode their brand, utilizing the power of organic content. My background is a failed radio presenter. About 12 years ago now, actually, I had a gig on a digital radio station, a national station. They brought in the ex-head of Radio 1. He said, we're going to make some sweeping changes. My first change, I'm sacking you. I think you're terrible. He might have had a point, but I was very offended at the time. And then after that period of time, I sort of worked in PR, marketing, branding. So I've been in and around the space for sort of about 16, 17 years now. God, that ages me, but it is the truth. It is what it is. And then in 2012, I fell in love with podcasts. I was like, these are amazing. This is like radio, but nobody can sack you. Why don't I just do this? And then I sat on the fence for 5 years. And the reason I think it's important to tell people that is there's so many people who will be beating themselves up for the thing that they haven't done yet. I haven't started my blog. I haven't started my YouTube. I haven't started my podcast. It's fine. The best time is to start today. The best time other than that is to start tomorrow, but just get up and running because nothing's going to happen unless you take some form of action. And fast forward from 2017 till now, as I say, we've launched 162 podcasts for clients and content marketing and personal branding. It sounds well cheesy, but it's changed my life, which is why I'm so passionate about it. I had a very unfulfilling property management company that I was running before I sort of started a podcast. It's changed my world a little bit. And I think it's imperative for people, regardless of their sector or the space that they're in, to understand the power of personal branding and personal PR, as I like to call it, because unfortunately, whether you like this or not, and this is going to land for people in two different ways, you have now got two jobs. There's the thing that you do to pay the bills, and you are your own now full-time PR manager. Whether you like it or not, it's just the reality of it. Because if you're not showing up, if you're not being visible in your space, in your sector, then your competition is going to be. So I guess that's the sort of the 2-minute sell on me, I guess.
Oh, no, it's really useful. I love this, that everyone's now their PR manager. It's absolutely right. And I think sometimes we think, oh, I'm doing too much. Like, definitely, Jo and I, we create content all day. That's kind of what we do. And we're like, are we doing too much of this? But I don't think you can ever be doing too much of it. But it can be really distracting from the day job. And definitely when we're speaking to bookkeepers, they're like, I haven't got time for this. I've just got to get on with my client work.
You've touched on a really important point there, and I want to touch on it to make sure it lands for people. This is the day job. This is the day job. It's not like, oh, well, I'm doing the bookkeeping and then then I'll put the kids to bed and then at 7 o'clock I'll have a little play around on TikTok. You've got to think of it differently. If you're doing social media, if you're doing personal branding in the right way, it's an income generating activity. I'm sure lots of the bookkeepers within the community talk to their clients all the time about, being delineating their time based on value and, look at income producing activities versus admin time. And when you're doing that sort of stuff, and how do you look at your high volume activities and all that kind of stuff? Content marketing is an income producing activity. It's as important as the thing that you do for your clients. Now, it might not feel like it when you're, especially like coming up to like tax season and all the rest of it, and you can be working 17, 18 hours a day in January to get to the 31st of January for the self-assessment tax returns, blah, blah, blah. We get all that stuff, but you have got to find, whether you like it or not, and you normally won't want to, you have got to find the time. You have to make the time for this, because it's as important as any other thing that you do. You know, would you, if you had a client meeting, would you miss that client meeting? No, because it's in your diary. Diarize the time to make content, because it's important. You know, you and Jo are a testament to it. You know, why have you got such a big community? Why are you so well renowned in your space? Why have you got a brand new sponsor for your podcast? Why have you got, best-selling books? Why, when there's stage speaking opportunities, will they come to you and Jo? Because you bang social media content based on building your personal brand. It works, but it is work as well. It works, but it is work. It's hard work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. James, do you know, I'm going to rewind a little bit for anyone who we've called this why you need to build a personal brand. And I wonder whether you can take us back to what it really means to have a personal brand for anybody who's new to this idea.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm about to give you the only explanation of branding you're ever going to need. Get a pen and paper. This is going to blow your minds. I'm saying this ironically because it's not. Your brand is your reputation. Nothing more, nothing less. Your brand is your reputation. If you take nothing else away from this conversation, just remember that. Because I think, especially these, when I started out in PR and marketing, it was 2006. So yeah, 16, 17 odd years ago. And PR was done by PR people. Marketing was done by marketing people. Brand was done by branding people. Over the preceding 16 years, when I first went into it, there wasn't a personal brand. No one, social media was just coming to the fore. I remember working with Nando's on the launch of their table sauces. So this was when they were first bringing their sauces into retail. And we had a paid for ads agency. We had me doing sort of broadcast PR. We had general PR. We had billboard advertising, subway advertising. We had all these different people doing this different stuff. And personal brand just wasn't a thing. The brand people came in. They give us a piece of work going, this is the brand that we are building with these sources. You lot go and do it. But in the 16 years, it's changed. It's massively changed because we just didn't have the channels now. Facebook is what billboards used to be. YouTube is what TV used to be. Podcast is what radio used to be. You've got the ability now. And again, I think it's so important to get this point across, Zoe. People sort of hate the idea of having to do the social media stuff, but it's free advertising. Back in the day, if you wanted somebody to pay for your bookkeeping services, you had to compete with everybody else in the same space down the same column of B for bookkeeper in Yale.com. Or on like the Thompson directory for those who are old enough. There's probably some young people going, what's he talking about? These were books made of paper. Sorry, it was not ecologically sound or good for the environment. But that was it. And that's what branding used to be. That's what marketing used to be. That's what advertising used to be. But building your personal brand, why is it so important? Going back to your question, it helps you to stand out from the crowd. It helps you to identify who your target market is. Effectively, if you get personal branding right, this is really important for people. It enables people to buy into you before they will buy from you. And that's basically what you're doing. When I do consultancy sessions now, people might have listened to me on my podcast or whatever it may be. They'll pay me 1,500 quid plus VAT for 4 hours. And the reason I chose that is because it was more than my dad used to charge. I don't know why, just psychologically, I just wanted to charge more than my old man used to charge, who was an accountant, by the way. He used to love a bookkeeper. And that sale, I do consultative selling, or I tell them how they can pay my invoice. That's it. I don't feel like I'm selling myself ever. Obviously, there's sales sort of environments that you go into, but I don't feel like I have to sell myself because my personal brand speaks for me. By the way, I'm not for everybody. I will be very Marmitey in my approach, where I work with a lot of sort of high-end CEOs to help them come up with their content strategy and deploy that marketing strategy. I know one way to do it, and that's organic content. It's not for everybody. Again, it's bloody hard work. It requires them to do a lot of the heavy lifting, and it's not always for them. But ultimately, people will buy into you before they buy from you if you get your personal brand right. And that's why it's so important. And here's the thing, whether you want to do this or not, you've kind of just got to now. There's so few industries where you can rise right to the top of your industry without having a personal brand. I was thinking, as I was saying it then, I was like, is there any? Maybe like in the medical profession or whatever. But even still, those people who write white papers and those people who have done the sort of the surgeries that people would talk about, people in the accountancy space, there will be famous accountants in your space, whether they're smashing mailing lists or they're great on LinkedIn or they've got a great podcast or whatever it may be. That's all personal brand. And if you think about the people that you've transacted with recently, if you think about the people who you've spent your money with, why did you spend your money with them? Because they had built a brand with you in their mind, or they'd leverage other people. So for example, I know that you guys have got that new sponsoring Go proposal. Why will people who listen to this podcast go and click the link in the show notes, which they should all do, by the way, and go and utilize that service and software? Because they are leveraging your personal brand, because I know, like, and trust you and Jo. So if you guys say it's good, well, it must be good. So they're still using personal brand, just indirectly.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love what you're saying as well about billboards and like the things that absolutely would have been out of reach before. I'm watching the comments come through at the moment. And by the way, thanks everyone who shared your light bulb moments. We're giving some prizes away this week. So I've got one here that says we're PR managers. Got somebody saying their light bulb moment is that this is an income generating activity. There's a question here that's come in though that says, there are 2 PR jobs: to build and keep up with 2 brands. So our personal brand and our business brand, which is different. How do you do both? How do you manage them? Because they are different, aren't they? Your business has an identity of its own, and then you as an individual have a brand. What do you focus on, and how do you separate those two?
So basically, when I'm sort of developing a brand strategy, and again, I just want to make it really simple for people, because there's so much personal brand waffle that's out there these days, and people make it sound so complicated. Your brand, your reputation, just remember that, right? But there are ways to work out what you want that reputation to be, and then how to deploy that message in a way that engages with the market. So for example, and these are the things I always walk clients through. So if you want to, take a pen and paper: core values, USPs, mission statement, value proposition, ideal buyer profile, stakeholders, and target market. Now, if you focus on those 6 or 7 things, I don't know, I was counting on my fingers and I lost count with my fingers. Great for a bookkeeping podcast when all you guys are great with numbers. But yeah, those 6 or 7 points will make sure that you're on the right track. Now, you do this exercise, core values, USP, mission statement. You do that for you, and you do it for your company. And what you'll find is there'll be crossover points. So there'll be things that you can talk about as the CEO, the MD, or the entrepreneur within that business. But here's the thing: again, for those who are, business branding and business marketing is very, very differently done. So for example, within my podcast agency, all we really do is we frame a pain point and we show that we're the solution to it. So in terms of brand building marketing activity, we are showing that we are the experts in our field. What we also do is we leverage the results we're helping other people get, and we will share that stuff out. And that's how we're building that brand. But what I do as a personal brand, I do a lot more activity on my personal brand, because I can then, what I class as a director's loan, I will director's loan my attention to the business or the thing that I'm working on. So Zoe mentioned at the beginning here that we know each other very well through Clubhouse. Now, Clubhouse was a social audio app, and we created a brand within there called the Winners Club. That's now got 50,000 entrepreneurs and business owners in there. We've done things like, we've done live events, and we've sold out tickets in 10 days before Christmas at 150 quid a pop to over 100 people, because I can leverage the brand potential that I've got, the brand recognition that I've got, and I can place it towards that Winners Club event. I'm speaking at EMC in a couple of weeks, which is the big entrepreneurs marketing conference. I can leverage my attention and tell people, go and buy a ticket for that. If I launch a new podcast for a client, I can go, hey, this is our client. I can go and leverage my attention for that. So in answer to that question, yes, there are 2 things. You basically need to work out what the brand message is for both of those. Maybe you can think of it like a vertical. So you are one vertical, your business is another vertical. By the way, you might have multiple businesses. So within my world, I've got the Phonic Content, which is the content marketing agency. I've got the Winners Club and all that kind of stuff that I do. I'm a sort of a speaker and a podcaster myself. So I've kind of got 3 things that I need to position myself as. But again, I use my personal brand to shine light on all of those separate things. But effectively, core values, USPs, mission statement, value proposition, ideal buyer, stakeholder, target market, work that stuff out. And by the way, that's not done in a matter of minutes. This could take you hours or days even. Get really clear on that, and then have a clear, again, not to be sort of like waffly, but a tone of voice. Like, how do you want your brand to sound? How do you want it to feel? So like, for example, with what you and Jo have created, if I get on the mailing list, or I see the artwork, or I listen to the podcast or the YouTube, or I'm in one of the groups, I get the same look and feel and the tone of voice, because otherwise a confused mind doesn't buy. It's like, well, who is it, Zoe and Jo really? and you've got your own entities and your own businesses and your own personal brands, but you've come together brilliantly to effectively, this is a business brand. You know, the Bookkeepers Bootcamp is almost like a sort of a vertical of your brand. The podcast is a vertical of the brand. The community is a vertical of the brand. But you've got a tone of voice. You've got an essence and a sense of what the brand stands for. And yeah, so that would be my sort of slightly long-winded answer of how to cover those both off. But for those who are going, oh God, haven't got any time. If you've only got the time, and by the way, you've got to make the time, you're not going to find it, make the time. If you've only got time for one, focus on your personal brand, because you can shine that attention to wherever you want it to go to.
Oh, this is so good. And I'm watching the comments coming through, and someone said, I'm holding myself, I can't see your name, I'm really sorry. I've held myself back, I need to stop hiding. And I think that is just maybe a curse of being a bookkeeper or an accountant. We try and sort of stay behind the computer because it's kind of our safe space, and we do need to change that now. What's the danger of not doing that, really? Because you said your dad was an accountant. How did he feel about getting out of his comfort zone and raising his profile?
Well, I'm fortunate not to sort of like put a damper on it, but my dad's no longer with us and he passed away a long time ago. Sorry, I've sort of ruined the vibe of the room. So he never got to the personal brand stage because he passed away before like social media was a thing. And categorically, knowing him very well, he would not have done it. He wouldn't have. He'd have gone, oh, what a load of nonsense. It's for children, blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's actually quite a good impression. For those who knew my dad, they'd be like, oh, yeah, that's quite good. He just wouldn't have done it. He wouldn't have seen the value in it. He'd have gone, oh, I'm going to give it to one of the kids in the office. I'm going to tell them to TikTok. They're all ticky-tocking. He would have thought of that. But ultimately, that business would have got left behind if it maintained the way that it was. But I guess it's probably like a lot of practices. It was reputation. They got bought out in the end before he passed away. And, they were a very sort of a micro successful company, sort of 30 odd staff, a great reputation. All of the local businesses used them. His claim to fame was that he told, who's the famous guy on Bake Off? Paul Hollywood. He told Paul Hollywood not to get into bread because there was no money in it. So maybe he didn't know a thing that he was talking about, frankly, because Paul Hollywood's done all right for himself. But he wouldn't have. He would have got left behind. The danger is, and that is the danger, if you don't do this, you are going to get left behind. You're going to become irrelevant. Look at people like, and I get it for bookkeepers, accountants. I've worked with a lot of dentists. Dentists are the worst. Like you guys in the financial world, you're quite good compared to dentists. Them lot are scared of their own shadows. And there's certain sectors where I think there's royal bodies and you have to adhere to a code of conduct and all that kind of stuff that don't want to share themselves. But the point is you just have to. It's just that simple. You just have to. Or you don't. But you have to be willing to stay where you are and just hope that your organic client base doesn't erode quicker than your sort of like lifetime that you want to run this business for. But what I would say, what I've found with a lot of people is they don't like, everything feels a bit showy offy, especially accountants, dentists, who else have I worked with? Opticians, bloody hell, they're hard work as well. Shout out to all the opticians and the dentists. I do love you dearly, but my God, you make my job difficult. But ultimately, if you frame your experience and use it as a lesson, then it becomes branding, not bragging. So, for example, I can say to you that I've launched 162 podcasts. I can end that sentence there. I've launched 162 podcasts, and we've got the most successful podcast production agency in Europe. End that sentence there, and everyone's like, who's this guy? Who's he fancy? He likes himself a bit, doesn't he? But if I give you a lesson, it becomes branding, not bragging. So I've launched 162 podcasts. We've got Europe's #1 podcast agency for successfully launching podcasts. And the number one thing that I find that most podcasters don't do is they don't market their podcast very well. So are you using audiograms? Are you using TikTok? Are you using Reels? Are you using clips? Because the promotion of the podcast is as important as the making of the podcast. So now just in that lesson, I've gone from being a bit full of myself to actually being full of useful information. If you turn your experience into a lesson and a learning, it goes from bragging into branding. And I think that's really important. And again, the thing that you want to do, it's a massive credibility accelerator. Just keep shining the light on the results you help other people get. Because then you're literally not making it about you. So from all the podcasts that I've done, yes, we've had a lot of really super successful ones, but who really cares about what I've done? People care more about what it's done for other people. I've had people who've changed their entire life off the back of doing a podcast. We've got a hypnotherapist who literally he's stopped all other forms of marketing because he can't take the leads. He's just getting too many. He gets 250,000 downloads a month now. and he does these mad, like, soundscape movie based. I mean, that's pretty niche, right? But I can show my credibility. This guy's just, getting to 250,000 downloads a month. So I can use his experience and his success to leverage me, because I'm the guy taught him podcasting. So it makes me look great, but I can make him look great, which makes me look even greater. So that's what I'd say to the people who are listening to this. Find the lessons and the learnings in your experience, give that lesson and learning. And if you do it in the right way, it becomes branding and not bragging, because that's what most people are scared of. Oh, what people are going to think. Who cares?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because you've also, you've set the scene of, this is why you should pay attention to me, and hey, here's something that's going to help you, that shows I know what I'm talking about. So it's not just, here's some like stat that you want to hear. You have really helped people and supported them by saying, this is the thing that you're maybe, and I would be like, yeah, we haven't done any TikToks with stuff from our podcast. So straight away I'm like, okay, I need to pay attention here. So
yeah.
Podcasting that. So my next question is about how bookkeepers get known. I want to talk to you about podcasting. Like, I don't know any bookkeepers with a podcast. Do you think there's a missed opportunity here?
Massively. I honestly think, and you might think, oh, as the podcast guy, he's going to say this, there is nothing that is more powerful for building expert authority and being the thought leader in your space than having a podcast, or conversely, being on other people's podcasts. Because a lot of people are like, well, what am I going to talk about every week? And what am I going to share every week? And I don't want to do it every week, and I haven't got the time. Fine. Create a guesting strategy, because there are millions of podcasts registered. There are hundreds of thousands that get launched every single month, or that put out new episodes every single month, and you can leverage that audience. There's 56% of people will click a link in the show notes when they're told to do so, supposedly. So it's a great call to action medium. So I think, as a Clubhouse, when Clubhouse first popped off, I'd never seen anything like Clubhouse in terms of gaining attention and awareness and getting attention for the thing that you were talking about. But what burns very bright tends to burn very short, and it did. And even then, I was still saying, I think that even get all this attention, all the quick attention on Clubhouse, and then put them onto your podcast. Podcast is this weird medium where you can reach people at times when no other mediums can reach them. So when you're in the car, on the gym, in the treadmill, you can't really out for a walk, doing the washing up, pushing the kids in a buggy or whatever it may be. You get to people at times when nothing else can distract them. How many times these days, when you've got 70 million Facebook fan pages, when you've got 700 million LinkedIn accounts, when you've got 1 billion YouTube channels, how many times can you actually get people's pretty much undiluted attention? It's not very often. And the other thing is, with long form media, again, in terms of our mutual friend, Matt Wilson, who's a great marketer, he talks about the trust timer. So anytime, so for example, for people who've listened to this for 25 minutes or whatever we've been chatting for so far, minus the full start at the beginning, which you can edit out. No, don't keep it. It's brilliant. But they've built up that trust timer. Now, not everyone's going to like me, by the way. They might be like, oh, who's this Cockney white boy? Like, oi. But some people, those who do like what I've got to say and like, oh, this guy knows his stuff, I've now built up 25 minutes of trust timer with them. So it stands to reason, if they're listening to this podcast, they might go and find my podcast and they go, oh, I like this guy. He talks about branding. I've got a podcast that's all about building brands, called Building the Brand. So again, they might now jump across to listen to my podcast. And then again, each week I put out content, which could be 30, 45, 60 minutes long. I'm now building up that rapport with that ideal buyer for that entire period of time. And not that they have to be an ideal buyer, because they might be somebody who I had an opportunity a couple of weeks ago. GB News reached out to me because of somebody who'd listened to my podcast who inadvertently, his wife was a producer at GB News, and she'd heard him talk about podcasting and was like, oh, who's that guy? Because we need him to go and talk to. I ended up chatting to Michael Portillo. I was like, how on earth has this happened? Giant of a man, by the way, incredible socks, it turns out. I had Business Insider. We're doing a piece about Harry and Meghan's podcast agency. And they were like, I said to them, how did you find out about me? They said, our editor listened to your podcast and then followed your blog. These things are free to do. Like, it's free. Back in the day, and I've done this, as a failed radio presenter, the only way you could get your voice heard was if someone from the higher echelons of the broadcasting world decreed that we will take you and you will say what we want you to say and you will play our music. You've got complete carte blanche now. It's completely your thing. So and here's the thing with podcasting, right? Everyone thinks, oh, everyone's got a podcast already. They haven't. There's 4 million podcasts that have ever been registered. But in the last 30 days, only 8% of them put out a new episode. So 360,000 podcasts globally, this is. Now, that might still sound like a massive number. Well, there's 360,000 people to compete with versus 70 million Facebook fan pages, 700 million people on LinkedIn, 1 billion YouTube channels. And here's the other thing. Whilst you might say, well, how big is the audience if there's, 360,000 podcasts out there? Last month, there were 400 million downloads of podcasts. So if you average that out, and it's obviously not a fair average because some get massive audience and some get next to none. But if you average that out, it's 1,200 people per show that went live. What difference in your business could 1,200 of the right people giving you their undivided attention do every single week? Do you know what? Scrap that because that might even sound too much for people. What would it do? Let's say, for example, you get 10% of that number. What would 120 people who are your ideal buyer, what difference could it make to your business if they listen to you for, an hour per month? It's a game changer. But again, you just got to get in the game. And as you and Jo know, it's not easy. It's not simple. It takes a bit of time. But anything that's worth having takes hard work. You just got to choose your hard, I think.
Yeah, it's consistency as well. I think that's what
Yeah.
we've learned. If you can put a podcast episode every week out, and people will know that the first episodes of the Bookkeepers podcast cannot be found because they were never published because we didn't know what we were doing. And I mean, as I demonstrated this morning, I didn't know what I was doing this morning. But stuff goes wrong. Like this is just real life. But
that builds your brand, right? To your marketplace. Those that want like the really high polished, highfalutin, FCA regulated. Here's your bookkeeping advice that's in a leather bound back binder and blah blah blah. They're not your marketplace anyway. The people that want to listen to you are going to resonate with who you guys are. They're going to love the fact that there was a big mess up at the beginning of this podcast episode. How ironic. The podcast guy and the person with the super successful podcast can't get it together to make a podcast sound all right to start with. But people, that makes you human, and that humanizes your brand, which is super important because, again, your brand is your reputation. And the reputation, here's another sort of part of that puzzle. Your reputation, you don't control that because it only exists in the mind of your ideal buyer. So your brand to me and your brand to somebody else is completely different. You want it to be a certain thing. You can curate the narrative for sure. You can try and make me think the thing you want me to think. But ultimately, I own your brand in my mind. That sounded a bit weird. I own your brand.
Yeah.
But people do. And so it's really important to, that humanizing aspect, because a lot of people will listen to this. I guarantee what will happen. A lot of people will listen to this who are hiding, because somebody said that already in the chat box. They're hiding. So now they'll start putting out stuff from their company, but they'll hide behind the logo. They'll hide behind sort of the facade of the business brand. Personal brand far exceeds that in terms of power, but you've got to be willing to put yourself out there. So don't get me wrong, you don't have to be doing selfies of your lunch every day, and you also don't have to say, on your bad days, everything has gone Pete Tong. But the way that you can share your knowledge, share your information, gain know, like, and trust from a demographic, from an audience, you can't beat it.
I'm going to ask a question that Claire's posted. She said she's struggling. Oh, Claire, she's struggling to think that anyone might want to listen to what I have to say. Any tips for getting over this? I think, that is definitely a challenge. I think Jo and I have just waffled away to each other for months before we realized anyone had ever listened to the podcast. And for us, it was a mindset shift. But what do you say to your clients, James?
That's absolutely it. It's just a shift in mindset. There is always an audience for you out there. We've got a podcast right now called the Grand Investigation Podcast, and this is literally aimed at, it's a recruitment podcast for geological recruiting services. The guy phoned me up. He was like, "Can I do a podcast about that?" And I was like, "Mate, I like a niche, but this is maybe one step too far." But ultimately, it's got hundreds and hundreds of listeners. It doesn't matter how niche it is. Here's the other thing, is that everyone's got some knowledge, everyone's got some experience, everyone's got some lessons. Now, I have a particular way of growing brands, and it's worked for 6-7 figure companies. It's worked for, 100 million, 9-figure CEOs, but it's not for everybody. I don't profess to know everything. There's probably much better way. I don't know TikTok ads, Facebook ads, blah, blah, blah. I don't know about building brands in that way. I don't know about utilizing old school print press. That's not my world. So I can share my experience, knowing full well there are alternative ways to do it, but you've just got to Claire's point, you've just got to get out of your own way. And just, again, the thing I think that will be the shift for people is stop thinking about what you want them to hear and start thinking about what you want them to learn. As soon as you reframe it in your mind that you're trying to give a learning or a lesson, then I think that makes it a lot easier. So for example, like last week I interviewed, what's his name? Mikey Pierce, who runs his like vegan kitchen brand. He's him and his co-founder on like Made in Chelsea and all this sort of stuff. And I got to sit in front of 250 people, and I could just take a selfie and be like, hey, I'm in front of 250 people. But actually what was more useful than that, like try and give the learning that he told me. So again, leverage his expertise, his brand positioning, and again, keep just giving lessons back to people, because then it feels like branding, not bragging. Because that's most people, and Claire's not unique in that, by the way. So many people, Claire, if you're still listening, think what you think, but just try it. Just try it and see what difference it can make to somebody. You know, especially in the bookkeeping space. How many small business owners, you know, myself included, run around and we do, you know, we're building business here, we're scaling stuff up, we've got multiple things going. How many people don't really know their numbers? How many people don't know the basics? How many people in the world of business are going to get bit on the ass because they haven't allocated or accounted for VAT correctly? I started accounting for my VAT too late. And then all of a sudden, there was like, oh, yeah, we got a £7,000 bill here. And I was like, oh, sure. That's because I didn't ask the right questions, because I didn't have that information. So the stuff that you take for granted that you know now, because you've been in the game 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, whatever it may be, what is commonplace to you, what is common knowledge to you is not common to everybody else. So just remember that there's so much value in the stuff that you've got, and just start small. Just try and share a learning or a lesson. And again, use experience of the stuff that you're seeing with your own clients, because there will be commonalities. Your clients will come to you with the same issues. You know, oh, you know, I've got a small business owner and his team are out on the road doing sales. And, you know, the FD, she's getting really annoyed because no one's keeping their receipts. Oh, did you know that actually on most banking apps and most accountancy softwares, there's actually, you can take digital versions of your receipts. And this is how you onboard your team to do it. I know it's probably the like most basic thing in bookkeeping ever, but lots of people don't know that stuff. So share what you know in a way that can add value to people.
I've thought about this as well. You know, if I was, I like encouraged Jo to do YouTube because she's got someone in her family who can help her do the YouTube. But it's like, what would I do if I was running a bookkeeping practice right now and I wanted to start a podcast? And, you know, all of us, you all have clients who run businesses who probably want some exposure. And I think that, you know, it could be as, I don't know what you think about this, James, but it could be as simple as having a 20-minute chat with a business owner about, you know, what's going on in your business? What do you do? Why did you start your business? What have your challenges been around the numbers? And then sharing some kind of insight around, it doesn't have to be, it could be something like keeping on top of my receipts. It doesn't have to be, oh my God, I missed my VAT deadline. It's just something that then gives other people an insight. And I think that you have the network already to start this kind of conversation.
Yeah, 100%. And if you think about it, imagine if you went like exactly like you said there, Zoe. Imagine if you went to your client and said, hey, I'm actually going to be starting a podcast. I'd love to hear about you and your lessons and your business journey, and just find out about how you've got to where you've got to. You know, because the chances are the challenges that you've overcome, a lot of other businesses have as well. I'd love to get you onto a conversation. That geological recruitment podcast, for example, there's only 20 companies in the entire UK that could ever be his client. Only 20. So he's literally started that podcast as a way to get his foot through the door. So instead of going, oh, hey, you know, can I have a coffee with you at some point? Or even worse, hey, would you want to do a digital coffee? I mean, that's the worst offer of all time, by the way. If you're doing that, stop. And he's now going in, instead of a position of going with his begging bowl, going, hello, can I talk to you about my services? He's now going, hey, could I give you something, which is an interview, which could help you to leverage your to leverage your brand. It's massively powerful. We did it last week at the business show. We had a stand there. And this is another good thing. You know, look at what everyone else is doing and don't do the opposite, because, you know, they sort of say, oh, you know, watch the herd and then go the other way. But maybe just do something, just a little bit of a tweak that's different. So we went on to the 30,000 entrepreneurs and 750 exhibitors last week. As soon as we went onto the exhibitor list, I started getting hit with, hey, we're at the show. We're going to be doing the photos. We're doing the videos. We're doing this. Can we say this? Can we say this? Can we say this? And I sat with my team. I said, why don't we do something different? Instead of going to people and saying, can we get something from you? Why don't we flip it on its head and say, can we give you something? So we say, we're going to be doing 15-minute interviews so we can, exactly to your point, so we can talk to you about your business journey, the learnings and lessons that you've had, and direct people towards your booth at the business show. Right? Dead simple. 15 minutes. That was it. I didn't think anyone would really take us up on it, but I had one of my guys mail out to every single exhibitor. We had 37 people come and did live interviews with us over the two, or booked to do interviews. I said, yeah, only a third of them will turn up. You know, it's standard that, you know, drop off rate's massive for that sort of stuff. So yeah, we'll probably get, you know, 10 out of 37 that are booked, 36 turned up and did it. 36 turned up and did it. And all we did was like, hey, so tell us about your business. I literally started with, you know, give me the 2-minute upsell as if we were at a networking event. Tell me, you know, about you and your business. Then from that, they'll tell me something. I'm like, okay, cool. We carry on the conversation for 10 minutes, press the jingle at the end, bing, bang, bong, done. So now I've got 36 interviews with people that we've bashed out over 2 days. Now, here's the thing, right? They are now, I've got another reason to email them. I've got a piece of content that adds value to them. They're already now sharing it across, I saw LinkedIn, someone had used it as their podcast episode for this week and tagged us in. So now we've got an opportunity to sell to those people as well. It wasn't difficult to do. And the other thing you'll find, to your point, Zoe, about getting clients on, people love talking about themselves. And imagine if you could find out a bit more about that guest or about that person, or about that client or that customer that you hadn't known about before. And that you've now built up that know, like, and trust even more. Here's the other great thing to do. Clients and customers, yes. But what about those people who are sat on the fence? What about those who have thought about becoming a client? You haven't quite got them across the line. Those that have, you know, we've all had them as clients. I've got one at the moment. I've got to find a way to sack her off, quite frankly. But you know, they keep trying to get information out of you. They keep saying they're going to do it, and they never quite pull the trigger, and they're sort of like sat on the peripheries the whole time, and they're never going to do it, or you need to nudge them over the line even further. Instead of having another one of those sales calls, another Zoom, or another, you know, back and forth on email, which is sapping your time, by the way, say to them, do you know what? Because, you know, I love the question that you've raised here. I bet loads of other business owners have got exactly the same question. Instead of us, you know, doing a Zoom call, would you mind jumping on and doing a quick podcast episode? Because if it can, I would love to help you personally. I can help other people as well. Again, you're just shifting that positioning of power. And now someone who's maybe sat on the fence of your services, you get the opportunity to help them for like 15, 20, 30 minutes during this podcast. But effectively, you're giving them consultancy. So now, again, what have you done? You've built up that know, like, and trust. Like, oh, they really know their stuff. Now I'm ready to convert. They've bought into you. Now they'll buy from you.
Yeah, and for anyone who's thinking about advisory services and what's the way in, it's asking the questions. What's your goal? Why did you start your business? And helping, if you can relate to that, and then you can say, well, actually, you know, I can do more than the bookkeeping. I can also do this, which is going to help you get closer to your goal. That is the way in, those kind of conversations. I love this. I can see everyone saying as well about their new podcasts they're going to start, and all the names. Brilliant. And Mythbusters, and, you know, sort of dealing with the things that people said down the pub and stuff. I love this. So it's just creative, and we don't always think like this. What are the other things that bookkeepers need to be thinking about when it comes to personal brand? I don't know that everyone's going to start a podcast, but how can they kind of, you know, we're numbers people, we like to measure things. How can we see whether the effort we're putting in is actually paying off for us? What are the things we should be tracking?
So one of the things I'd say is, as far as possible, try to maximize all of the assets that you're making. So one of the things, the majority of our clients, they are information rich and time poor. And that's probably very similar to the audience that are listening to this podcast or listening to the live stream as well. Information rich and time poor. So you've got to leverage the hell out of what you spend your time doing. So for example, this is a great use of your time. It's going to take you an hour of your time. You'll have a conversation which is moderately interesting, hopefully. Maybe it gives you some insights for your own podcast. Brilliant. But you're now spitting this out onto LinkedIn and onto Facebook and onto all of your private platforms. You could then, if you wanted to, you could then get the link from StreamYard. You can put this up onto YouTube and it becomes a YouTube episode. Maybe as a way of leveraging people to come and become part of the community, they get early access. So maybe, for example, you put it on YouTube, but it's hidden. So it's unlisted to the public, and it's only members of the community that get to see it first. You could then take it one step further, and you could actually then have this podcast transcribed, and you could turn this into a blog. And that blog could then go onto Medium and LinkedIn articles and your mailing list. So now all of a sudden, you've got, from that one piece of content, you can then do quote graphics, TikTok, YouTube Shorts are killing it right now in terms of like driving attention and focus. We had a client a couple of weeks ago, and you know, they came to us and they wanted to do all the paid for stuff straight off the bat. I said, look, you haven't got a brand. Oh, we've got this. I said, you haven't. I said, you've got a logo. That's not a brand. You need to have a solid bed of content, so that if people go and find you organically through your podcast, whatever it may be, they start to build out that know, like, and trust. No, we're going to do it with paid ads. I said, what have you done before? Yeah, paid ads. I said, what are the results you've had? Oh, not the ones we want. I said, okay, just trust me then. Just trust me that this might work. Trust me for 12 weeks. You're already a paying client anyway. Please let me do my job as effectively as we can. And last week I put something out about sort of consistency within content. They put a screenshot, 900% increase, 300% increase in this, 1500% increase in this, that, and the other. I mean, don't get me wrong, they were not doing big numbers to start with, so we didn't have much further that we had to jump to make it have a big impact. But it just worked. But what we helped them to do was leverage that asset as far as possible. So do a recording of something like a podcast, becomes a YouTube video, can go to LinkedIn. Again, this is what a lot of people do as well. I see getting them wrong. Maybe they are in a B2B space. They spend all their time on Instagram. Instagram's dead. Like, just leave it alone. Don't leave it alone. There's still an audience there. It still could be useful to a certain extent. But if, for example, you've got B2B services, your place is LinkedIn. Play it in the place where your audience is. So again, from a podcast episode, you can't upload a whole video as it stands to LinkedIn. Maybe they'll change that at some point. I think you can do 10 or 15 minutes. So cut out a killer clip of the podcast, subtitle it, because again, 80% of videos are watched on silence. So actually people will read it at their desk rather than listening to the content. Make that as a clip. Again, then you've got the transcript, which could be the blog. The blog, you can probably cut into 2 or 3 posts that can go out each week. Your entire week's worth of marketing can come from one long form piece of content if you go into it with the intention to make it repurposable, if that makes sense. So that would be my top tip on that one.
I love this. I mean, we had an in-person event a few weeks ago called our Next Level Retreat, and we went through actually everything we do with the podcast. And I think we had about 19 pieces of content that we could get out of the podcast. I know we could probably get that to like 50 if we kept on and on and on. And it's realizing what you can do. I think people think that creating content is such a massive project, and actually it's about being strategic about like, what's the thing I need to be doing, and how do I replicate that every single time. So I'm excited.
That's key to it, is to replicate it every single time, because consistency is key with any form of marketing and media. So like with a podcast, for example, if you launch on like a Thursday, by hook or by crook, get that episode out on a Thursday. The other thing is, to your point, it's almost outcome thinking. Start with the end in mind. What do you want this podcast to do? Because if you just go into a podcast for the sake of recording a podcast with somebody, you're going to get a certain level of value to that. But actually, if you say, right, and it's a system and a process, we have this within the agency. I've got somebody who does just audio, somebody who just does video and the graphics, got somebody who's the team manager. I've got somebody else who just does the artwork and all that kind of stuff for us. So that all these departments now, I say departments, is like 4 people. It sounds a bit grandiose, but these people have to know exactly what's going on, the system and the process that we've created. So the client sends the audio, then it goes to that person to turn it into that clip. But we start out in advance. We know that we're going to pull for most of our clients who are on like our top tier package, where we effectively become like their marketing agency for them, right? But they have to give us that long form piece of content. So we get the YouTube video, the audio, we get a LinkedIn extended clip, which is ideally between 3 and 7 minutes long, because that's what works on it. We get 1 or 2 YouTube shorts, get 1 or 2 TikToks, we get 1 or 2 Instagram reels. We will transcribe the podcast into a blog. I say the blog goes on to Medium, and it goes on to LinkedIn, and it goes on to LinkedIn articles. It goes onto their mailing list. We get graphics that could go onto their Instagram. We will then, from the blog, we'll create graphics about the blog's gone out. Then we'll create another one, which is like, did you read our blog a couple of days ago? So your whole marketing plan can come out of it. But effectively, if you've got like a little team around you, or you've got an in-house team who can help you out with this stuff. Because again, what I don't want to do is people hear this and go, oh my God, how am I going to do 19 pieces of content? You don't have to. You just have to be intentional, have the strategy to make that content, because this stuff doesn't happen by accident. What you and Jo have created with your podcast within the community, it didn't happen by accident. You were intentional with the content. But again, if people have got any question about how powerful personal brand could be in their space, especially for bookkeepers, look at you and Jo. Why are you watching this content? Why are you in their community? Why are you listening to their podcast? Why are you on their mailing list? Because of their brand, because they attracted you to them.
Oh, thanks, James. Okay,
I presume so. Maybe just feel guilty. I don't know.
Maybe they have. They didn't have anything else to do this Tuesday morning. Look, I know that you've got a really great way for people to check how they're doing with their own personal brand, where you can kind of give them some results. Can you tell me about that? Because I think people will be desperate to do this.
Yeah, so this is actually like a little quiz. So I did a talk at the beginning of, it must be the beginning of this year, and it's for 120 property investors. And property investors tend to have a bit of an ego. So it's like, I need to show these people very quickly whether they're doing a good job of their personal brand or not. And it was a big sort of stage event. So it's like, how am I going to get loads of people to do this at the same time? So I've actually created a little quiz. So you guys can actually do this in real time if you're watching now. or obviously if you're listening to the recordings after, the link will still be up and running. So it's phonicmedia.scoreapp.com. So that's phonic with a PH. So phonicmedia.scoreapp.com. And there's a little 3-minute quiz. It's going to take you to like a little score app thing. And it's going to ask you some questions about your personal brand. Now, what you need to do is to score yourself between 1 and 10 for the content that you've put out. There you go. It's on the screen now, phonicmedia.scoreapp.com. So what you need to do is score yourself between 1 and 10 for the content that you have put out in the last 30 days. Because a lot of time I talk to people about core values, mission statement, value proposition, all this sort of stuff. And they're like, oh, yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do that. Yeah, I've got a podcast. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I do LinkedIn. Yeah, I do TikTok. Yeah. Okay, cool. But what have you put out in the last 30 days? Because that's all perception of how your brand is perceived. But let's look at the reality of it. And you can go back for 30 days. So it's 10 questions. Rate yourself 1 to 10, 1 being awful, 10 being amazing. And you'll probably score yourself somewhere in between the two. So question 1 is, would someone be able to look at your content and know exactly who you are and what you do? So for your content for the last 30 days, LinkedIn, Insta, TikTok, YouTube, emailers, podcasts, any channel that you're on in the last month only. So 1 to 10, score yourself there. Question 2 is, how evident, I feel like I've done a quiz. Question 2.
It's good. I love this because I can see Kirsty's joining in. She's like, 1, awful. Oh, Kirsty, I don't agree. I know who you are, Kirsty. I disagree.
But this is brilliant, because if you score fantastically well, brilliant, you can see what's already working and carry on. If you score yourself badly, which people normally do, that's brilliant because you can see where there's the room for improvement. Because the first step to any improvement, anything, is a level of self-awareness. You know, walking around thinking, I don't get podcasting. My podcast is not as powerful as it should be. Categorically, every week. It annoys me every week. I did one yesterday calling out FIFA about how bad their brand is. And I'm like, that's not going to get the traction that it needs to get because I'm not doing a good enough job. So we still have got room for improvement. So Kirsty, me and you are in the same boat. We can sail to the shore of success together. So question 1, would somebody have to look at your content, know exactly who you are and what you do? Question 2, how evident have your core values been across your content? In the last 30 days, how evident, between 1 and 10, how evident have your core values been across your content? And by the way, again, you might be going, well, I haven't got any core values. Then you need to do that piece first. Yeah. Number 3.
That's interesting, actually, because I mean, I show up, there's usually a child. If I'm doing a live or something, there's often a child, Mummy, can I have an ice lolly or something? And I'm like, well, do you know what? We talk about building a business around your life, and this is my life. And I think that just shows, you know, what you said about having a polished brand or this kind of black, briefcase, or, that isn't us. And that's okay. And it's important to know that, like, you're for some people and you're not for other people. And it's like choosing which bits of my life am I going to bring in? And that's part of your values, isn't it?
Yeah. So one of our values as an agency, for example, is that fun. Like, if it's not fun, I just don't see the point in it. Like, I'm an old holiday rep entertainer. Like, if I'm not having fun, I'm not interested. I don't want to do it. So again, that has to come across in our core values. How obvious, number 3, how obvious have your USPs or your unique selling points been across your content in the last 30 days only? How obvious have your USPs been across your content in the last 30 days? And again, if you go, well, I haven't actually got any USPs, then you need to work on that bit first. Why is this important? You know, for me, for example, and again, bookkeepers, there's loads and loads of bookkeepers out there. So you need to make your point of difference obvious. Same as there's lots of podcast agencies. God knows there's more and more of them popping up all the time. You know, I mentioned that we've launched 162 podcasts. Is that unique? Sort of, I guess so. But I was also a failed radio presenter. Is that unique? So I understand broadcasting. Yeah, I guess so. I've run from a standing start, I've grown a 7-figure business utilizing podcasts as the only marketing channel. Is that unique? Yeah, kind of. Put those things together. £1 million business from a standing start, broadcast experience, and launched 162 podcasts. Now I'm super unique. Have I said that in the last 30 days? Probably not, to be fair. So me and Kirsty are probably scoring ourselves a 1 again there. Number 4, have you promoted your mission statement? This is really important. Your mission statement is not just the thing that now sits in a folder in the inner sanctum. We go, our mission is to make loads of money. Don't tell anybody. Because like my mission as an agency is to help entrepreneurs and business owners to explode their brand utilizing the power of organic content. I say it that often, I can just reel it off like that. But again, have I said that in the last 30 days? Actually, I have, because I told off my social media guy because we hadn't. But that's the only reason. But I've only said it once. So again, score yourself there. And again, if you haven't got a mission statement, get one. Number 5, does your content talk to your ideal buyer? Oh my God, I see so many people do this. And I did it again with the podcast agency when I started out. I started talking all technical. oh, here's the cable you need, here's the microphone you need, blah, blah. People don't care about cables and microphones majority of the time with the podcast. They care about getting their content out there. Like nobody cares about, the difference between this microphone and the cardioid frequencies and another microphone. Shut up, man. Like, make me a podcast. That's it. So just make sure, because again, people can get busy making content, but for the wrong people. So does your content talk to your ideal buyer? We're halfway through, guys. Number 6, does the content resonate with your target audience? So again, for Jo and Zoe, for example, based on the brand that they've built, if they were like, did a webinar like how to monetize, all of your clients right now, or how to find failing businesses that you can screw over for liquidation services. Like, I mean, I just now thrown a bunch of words there that might not even make any sense, but you'd be like, oh, that doesn't sit right. That doesn't really like, there is liquidation services. There are hardcore accountancy firms that are, cutthroat. It's just not the brand that Jo and Zoe have created. So again,
this is like a bravery thing as well. Like, this is why knowing your values is really important. Some of our community and our Success Lounge will know that there have been changes we've made in our business because things have come up. Like, we often get opportunities. Like, we'll have conversations all the time with people who are like, can you promote this? Can you do this? And we're like, well, no, we don't use it. We don't know what it's like. Someone else would go, great, extra income stream. But if it doesn't sit with us, we can't endorse something that we're not using or we're not confident in. Or like, we've pulled podcasts before that we're going to go out because we're like, there's an issue here and they're not prepared to talk about it. So we haven't gone ahead with the podcast. So, whereas someone else might say, well, that's okay, we'll run it like this. And it really comes down to what's right for you and what are your values. Yeah.
It's because you guys have got a really clear audience as well. You know exactly who you want to speak to, and you know what they expect from you. Because it's a two-way thing, this sort of branding game. There's a brand that you've created, and then there's a brand that you have to be. You guys have, branding should put you on a pedestal. And I'd say in your sector, I don't know any other bookkeepers, maybe because I don't know that many bookkeepers, but I don't know any bookkeepers who are sort of famous in their space like you and Jo are. So there's an expectation now. You've got to be the message that you preach, because you've got a lot of people who rely on you. So to heap the pressure on you.
No, it's true. But
it is true.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Number 7, does your content include a call to action or a CTA that drives traffic to one of your platforms? Again, I see so many people get this wrong. You make content and you're like, hey, I'm here on Instagram or on LinkedIn. That is not your platform. You could get cancelled at any time. If you're on Twitter, well, unless you're mates with Elon Musk, who's a madman, by the way. But yeah, all of those platforms, you don't control them. I had my Facebook account. As I said, I had this business that went from a standing start to 7 figures. I had a Facebook account that had years and years worth of credibility on it. It literally seen my journey from start. I think it was from 2008 or something. It just got cancelled. It was like, are you in Ho Chi Minh City? I was like, nope. And it was like, got shut down. Could never get it back.
Our Instagram got taken down as well, and we had to do heaps of appealing. It went on for months.
Yeah, did you get it back?
We got it back, yeah.
So I never got my Facebook account back. I never. And I my old wedding photo. That's why I've still got my rubbish old Instagram, because I had my wedding photos on there. I've also got an album, don't get me wrong, but it's not the only. I'm not accusing Mark Zuckerberg because I was too tight to buy a photo album. But all that credibility, all those first podcasts I ever launched, I haven't got them now. And my first one was like a clip art image. It looked bloody awful probably. But again, I can look back at it now 5 years later and go, that podcast went into the top charts and stayed there. I was in the top 20 for 6 months with a podcast I made with a 50 quid mic off my dining room table when I was broke. Like, haven't got that now. So, but again, my fault, because I didn't take people from that podcast and put them onto a mailing list, for example, onto an ActiveCampaign or a MailChimp. Now I know that they're third-party platforms, but you own that data. And you don't have to put a call to action on everything, by the way. In fact, I don't think you should. But at least a few times a week, you need to be driving people somewhere that gets you their data, where you own that data. For example, with the mailing list, you could do like a short version on LinkedIn. Say you want to find out more, join our mailing list. We're doing this on the mailing list. Like bang that stuff out, because then you control it. Again, with the podcast, it's one of the only places you don't have to pay to play. I get thousands and thousands of downloads a month. Again, not like a brag thing, but because I've been doing it for quite a long time, but I don't have to pay to get to that audience. Not like Facebook. If you follow my page, and I've got you there in the first place, and now I've got to keep paying to show you my content. Every week, people will listen to that podcast again and again. Number 8, how well does your content really represent your brand? how well really does it represent your brand? And again, that's a bit of a subject to your own, decision there. But just be honest with yourself. If you're looking at it going, oh, actually, it looks a bit pony. Like, just be honest with yourself. And again, does it really represent your brand? Does it tell people the thing that you want them to know? Number 9, how well do the visuals within your content and online platforms represent you? I see this a lot. People have got a logo and they think that's the only bit of imagery that they need to have, and the rest of it is, like some stock imagery. If you're talking about like doing a business event, it's just like, that standard whiteboard photo of like some person. Like, use you. People buy into you. No one wants to see Mr. Clip Art guy. No one cares what's behind that pen because we know he's not writing nothing. And finally, number 10, how proud, and again, this you have to sort of like have a little listen to your inner voice here. How proud do you feel when you look at your branded content that's been posted in the last 30 days? How proud do you feel when you look at your branded content that you've posted in the last 10 days? Again, vote yourself 1 to 10. Ordinarily, people will score themselves somewhere between 40 and 60%. So if you're above 60%, you've done well. If you're below 40%, you've got room for improvement. But again, the first step to any form of self-improvement is self-awareness. And again, I would come back and do this every 30 days as well, by the way. That link, it's a free test. It's not going to charge you or anything. Come back and do it. Stick it in the calendar every 30 days. Come back and do it. And go, right, what did I get better? Because I still do it. Every time I coach this to people, I'm like, oh, I still haven't put out the mission. I still haven't done the USPs thing. We still not got the messaging quite right. This is ever evolving and ever changing. So it's not like a score myself 90, done, because this is organic content. You've got to go again next month and next month and next month. But this might have all sounded like a lot of hard work. And in a lot of instances, it is hard work. But this is the difference between standing out from the crowd and just being another. There's lots of podcast agencies. There's cheaper podcast agencies. We're not the super expensive. We're not super cheap. We're probably somewhere bang in the middle. But people will use us as opposed to going for a cheaper option because they value what we do because of the brand that we've created. And you guys can do the same. Even you, Kirsty, because now we know where we've got to go. Me and you, Kirsty, we'll get there together.
It's good. I'm seeing people's scores. Excuse me. There are people someone said they were 19%. There's someone else who said 10, 12%. Mine came out at 77. I will say though that obviously.
Who does she think she is?
I think, who do I think I am? But we have we have a strategy and we roll it out and we do the same thing every week and we're consistent. So there are still things like we haven't shared our mission statement. I know where it is. I can share that. I'll do that today. Yeah. There are things that we can do, definitely things that we can improve. Look, Morag said 60%. I love that.
Go on, Morag.
I want to know what Morag's doing. So share it.
But that's great. What you've said, that scoring 77 is a fantastic score. But how much hard work has gone into getting it where it is now. It's such a danger with people who've got an elevated platform. You and Jo sit in an elevated platform because of the brand positioning that you've created through bloody hard work, through constant content, constant. Even on days off, I don't have days off from doing content because it's important to drive it for your business. And by the way, this is a decision that you have to make. If at the end of this conversation, you've gone, do you know what? I'm quite content where I'm at. I don't really want to play the brand game. I don't want to have to be busy all the time. I'd rather work 9 to 5 and then spend, 5 till 9 with my family. Then that's cool. But that's a decision that you're making. But make that decision. Decide for yourself. But if you are looking to stand out from the crowd, then personal brand is the fastest way to do it. And pretty much, I believe, the only way to do it. Yes, you can generate leads from Facebook ads and that kind of stuff, but it's not building long-term brand. And I've got a sales call today actually with a guy, amazingly successful PPC advertising agency, but he needs to help to build his brand. He can get more eyeballs on his content, but it's not building his brand, and it's two different things.
And I think that's it. Like anyone whatever your score's been today, there will be a question that came up in that quiz where you can go, I could do that. I could make a change there. And I think it's about starting to make those small changes. If you can make a 1% change, that's going to make a difference to your business. So don't focus on I need to get to 100%. Focus on how can I make a marginal improvement. And then when I come back to this next month, then I can take it from there because I've got this new base to work from.
But block it in your calendar as well. That's what I think. Because again, with the system and the process, I'm like, oh, it's all right for Zoe because she can pay for a team now and stuff, and that's fine. Again, for me, I've got an in-house team, and we still don't get it right all the time. But we've literally in my Google calendar, I know, like on a Monday, a branding blog goes out. On a Thursday, a podcast blog goes out. I know that I have a clip from a podcast on a Tuesday. I know on a Wednesday I have a testimonial. I know on a Friday I will post a mission statement or a USP. Like that is already in the calendar. Because then what you can do, if you're being super, super clever, if you're working with like, maybe you've got, you haven't got the budgets for sort of in-house agencies and stuff, maybe you're working with like a VA or you've got some Fiverr support or whatever it may be, you can do it in your Google calendar, write what days of the week you're going to do stuff. And then in the description, you can actually write the copy. And then if you've got somebody who's making you some graphics or some videos or some clips, they can put a link in that description for you. So you can bounce out to where it's hosted on Google Drive. So you can go, right, Monday's a blog. I'm going there. I can see the description for the blog. I can see the link to the blog. I can download it from there. Bosh, you're done. It's not easy, but it doesn't have to be super difficult either.
Oh, I love this. Oh, James, there have been so many amazing tips today, and lots of people are saying I need to go back and I need to listen again. And we definitely should chat again. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you. How can people find out more about you and connect with you?
Come and find me on LinkedIn, probably would be the best place for this community. So James Burtt, Burtt. I'm on LinkedIn over there. I'd love to connect with as many of you as possible and see if I can help you out, and let me know how you got on with your scores and stuff as well.
Amazing. Oh, thank you so much, James. And thank you everyone who's been here for the whole session. It's been amazing. An extra long one, but I think we've had so much value this morning. We'll be back at 2:00. I've got a session with talking to Ashley Leeds about building your brand on LinkedIn. So I'll see you back at 2:00. Have an amazing morning.
Can I come at 2? Is that okay?
Come and join us.
I need that one. I need that one.
See you at 2. Thanks, everyone. Bye.